Hey everyone, happy Monday. I hope it's a happy Monday, not like oh my gosh, it's such a Monday. I hate those kind of days. Sometimes they happen on Tuesdays and Fridays, even. The nerve. It's been an interesting day. Neanderthals in the Kitchen has gone #1 new release in 2 categories today. I did not see that come in. That's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome. Look what you guys did. That's pretty cool. I'm really excited about that, and just hope that the feedback that starts coming is good too. You just never know. Somebody may not like the fact that I used the term nutritional powerhouse umpteen times, because I did. Anyway, let's talk about the US dollar today. I have been mulling that over, and I just wanted to share with you some thoughts that I had on it, um, because I believe that we are looking at a financial collapse. That's we just can't keep doing what we're doing and not expect that to happen, of course. Um, but I wanted to educate folks who weren't aware of what our US dollar is based on now, because it's not based on gold. Um, there ain't there gold in them there hills, not in Fort Knox anymore. So it's not based on gold. It's not backed by gold like it's supposed to have been. That was the big assurance that the Federal Reserve gave us when they had their bright idea to become the Federal Reserve, and that's the packet of goods that we were sold. Yep, we were sold down the river or up the river or whatever. There was a river involved, I'm sure. Anyway, so before I get to that, I'm going to talk about the 10 things that men absolutely understand about women. Okay, I'm done. You feel educated now? Just kidding. No, really, we're going to talk about the 10 things that women understand about stripping down an AR-15. No? No, we're not going to do that either. No, really. We're going to talk about the dollar. Okay, so here's what's really backing the US dollar. It's petrol. And there was an agreement signed that all of the companies, or all the countries, excuse me, that were part of the petrol agreement, the US petrol agreement, would buy their fuel in US dollars. And what they would have to do is they would have to exchange their own currency for US dollars. So the US dollar was backed by fuel. So if you think for a second that this whole, we're not going to dig, we're not going to allow fuel to be developed here in the US, it doesn't have hardly anything to do with the environment. It has to do with the dollar and shoring up the dollar. They want a limited amount of fuel to shore up the dollar, make it more scarce in their efforts, if you will, their thought process of strengthening the dollar. In other words, the fewer houses there are to live in, the more valuable the houses are. So the fewer gallons of fuel we create, then the more valuable the dollar is, if that makes sense. That's the simplest way I can put it. But here's the problem, is that plan only works when the countries actually abide by the agreement. But you have countries that are no longer abiding by that agreement. And that is why I say that there will be a financial collapse. We are ripe for a financial collapse because of what several industries are doing. I mean, the banking industry is doing it all over again. The housing market is going nuts all over again. So that's reason enough right there. But the fact of the matter is we have countries that are bucking the trend, and they are no longer playing the petrodollar game. They are making agreements between themselves to obtain fuel. That's partly why the war is going on in Russia and the Ukraine, is because Ukraine doesn't want to play ball with Russia. Russia is trying to make their own rules with obtaining fuel. So that's really what's going on. And it's very interesting, is the countries that are no longer wanting to play ball are labeled as the axis of evil. I'm not saying that they're not problematic in any way, shape, or form, but I just find it interesting that they're labeled as the axis of evil, and I think it has more to do with their influence in the U.S. dollar than it does their thorn in the side of the U.S. Anyway, so that's what's really holding up the U.S. dollar, and it's starting to crumble because contracts are only as good as the people who uphold them, and they're just not upholding that agreement any longer. It's null and void, and other countries are seeing how these nations are getting away with no longer validating and complying with the agreement, and so they're starting to wonder, I wonder if I want to keep paying a fee to convert my currency into US dollars. So there's obviously some problems with that. Anyway, so that's the symptomatic version of what's going on. And I just was thinking, what can we, the people, do instead of just being at the mercy of the Federal Reserve and politicians who aren't telling us what's really going on, who try to feed us lies and try to tell us that we're not paying, 50% more for our groceries when we know darn well we're paying that and more. It's ridiculous, right? Our dollars simply are not going much further than they were a couple of years ago. People are having to get a second job just to pay for groceries. And that doesn't sound like a first world nation to me. That sounds like one that's starting a pathway to a third world nation status. So that concerns me because I love my nation. I love my country. Anyway, so I was thinking about what strengthens a nation, what compromises a nation, what gives a nation its credit score, its credit rating. And right now, the U.S.'s credit rating isn't all that great. And you have counties, you have cities who are getting terrible credit ratings, and there's no consequences for it. You will see headlines saying such and such city is now on a B minus, but they're still able to function, and they're not functioning because people are looking the other way and still giving them credit terms like they had before. They're just going more into debt and at worse terms. And so they're really actually worsening their credit standing. It's just like you and I, if we use up all our credit availability on our credit report, then our credit score goes down. So it's just the same with cities and municipalities and townships and counties. Their credit scores are going down because of the problematic crime in their areas. That affects their credit score. The foreclosures going up in their areas, the amount of office space that's available in their areas, that impacts the credit score. And we have these problems. More and more people are working from home. You don't need the office space now. It's much harder to rent out commercial space than it ever has been. We're just not sitting pretty as we used to be. So one thing you should also know is that the Federal Reserve cannot save the US dollar. They do not have that kind of power because the rules no longer apply. It's no longer based upon gold, and it's no longer based upon petrol. So they're not as in control as people would have us believe. But we, the people, are. There are some things that we could do, now pretty drastic, but there are some things that we could do that would shore up the US dollar and that would strengthen our nation once again. So you ready for this? One thing I wanted to share that I thought was really interesting. I was reading one of my history books the other day, and what few people realize is that the Revolutionary War was actually fought in part over the worthless nature of the continental dollar, because the government insisted on paying the troops with them, but that same government would not accept them for payment of people's taxes. They wanted the payment in gold and silver. So the continental dollar actually decreased to only 2 cents per dollar. Now, here's a quiz for you. Does anybody know what the US dollar is actually worth now based on what buying power it had in 1913 before the Federal Reserve was created? 2 to 3 cents. Food for thought. Okay, so here's the drastic solution. If Americans stopped using credit cards, it's drastic, I know. But if Americans shredded their credit cards, stopped using credit cards, I'm not saying stopped using credit, just credit cards, that would shore up the US dollar substantially. It would throw a wrench into a lot of businesses, a lot. But if Americans stopped relying on credit cards, if they stopped paying 5 times the inflation rate for things that they didn't need, and they started paying cash for what they needed, we still are beholden to the credit industry for homes, probably for automobiles, and unfortunately still for education. Those are important things. We have to have a vehicle to get around nowadays. I mean, I know there's people who don't, which is my hat's off to them. But most of us need a vehicle. We need a home. We need someplace. We need a roof over our head. And we need an education. Most of us need to go to school to get where we want to go in life. But if we were to shred our credit cards, we as a nation would shore up the US dollar. Because for every dollar that we go into debt as individuals adds $180 worth of debt to the national debt. $180 per dollar. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't like the thought that I contribute to the U.S. national debt. We can't expect Congress to get their, I'll be nice, to get their heads in the right place, and stop spending our taxes like it's, a never-ending fountain. But we could take back control if we got rid of credit cards. Think about the ripple effect that would happen. Let's talk about the credit industry as a whole. I mean, how corrupt it is. We are getting judged based upon 3 credit scores, the culmination of those 3 credit scores. And we have no say in how those credit scores are truly derived. We're finding out little bits here and there about some hacks, but I watched an interview once with the credit agencies, and they didn't even know how certain credit scores were derived. There's some things that we can count on. I was in the credit industry for 15 years doing mortgages, but and so there were some things that I knew, okay, well, this is bad for your credit. It's taking your score down. But it's just this mystery. And it's not who we are. And yet it's conveyed as who we are. I mean, it's just such a racket. And it takes forever for them to correct mistakes. And believe me, there are mistakes out the wazoo that change people's lives. And yet they just don't give a flying flip when there's mistakes made. It's like pulling teeth, getting them to fix it. Somebody made a comment here about homeowners insurance increases are also costing people out of their homes. What's worse is they're required by their mortgage to carry homeowners insurance. And then when something happens and they have the temerity to file a claim, they get dropped on their homeowners insurance. So then they go somewhere else to get homeowners insurance and they're charged a higher premium because they filed a claim. And so, yes, homeowners insurance is out of control, absolutely out of control. Anyway, we could take back control of our nation if we took control over that one aspect of credit. If we said, you know what, we're not going to play the credit game in this area of our lives, we would win. We would win big time. I mean, if we're adding to the national debt by having plastic credit, I don't know, does that make me unpatriotic? I don't know. I got to think about that. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. Certainly, I would never pay for my preparedness supplies with credit. Even just having it and saying, well, I never use it, I just have it for emergencies. I'd much rather you have cash for emergencies. That's preparedness. I think that, there's all these perks that you can get with using your credit card and then paying it off every month. But I think even having the credit card is a mistake. It's still playing by their rules. It's like having a snake and keeping it in the closet and saying, it may be a poisonous snake, but I just keep it in the closet just in case I need a poisonous snake. It really would make a difference. And I know I'm not going to get any traction on this whatsoever. I know that. It's drastic, but it's how we could take control. Now, here's an interesting thing. Do you know if only 3% of Americans were that drastic, it would make a dent, a significant dent in the credit standing of the U.S.? 3%. Maybe it's doable. I don't know. Anyway, that's my thought for today. In the name of financial preparedness, we got to do something. I think that we should have emergencies planned for, financial emergencies, but I think that should be cash that we save up for. And have that in different forms of assets as well. Somebody asked me if I thought that they should take their money out of their retirement, that they were out of debt, that they had all their preparedness supplies, etc. And I think that they were expecting me to say yes. And I said, no. I mean, if you're out of debt and you're fully prepared, then retirement is just an extension of financial preparedness. Yeah, it's volatile because it's at the mercy of, other people trading, but it still is preparedness. It still is financial preparedness. So I encourage that. But I think that we rely way too heavy on credit card debt. So that's my 2 cents, meaning that's my $1. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.